And thank you. I can sort of imagine what you're thinking, sort of world's fairs, and it's sort of, do they still have them? Are they still happening? Who cares? But there's also some of you out there that are probably saying, great, power nap. I'll run longer than I'm supposed to and help you out. The point is, World's Fairs are with us. One opened 3 weeks ago in Shanghai. If I could see you, I'd ask you to raise your hands, but I can't see. How many people knew the World's Fair opened? Not a lot. We tend to forget that World's Fairs exist. And in fact, they do exist. And we think they exist to show us the future. But in fact, they reveal the past and they reveal the present. And they reveal all the things we probably don't want them to reveal. They actually achieve the opposite of what we think they'll do. So today I'm going to talk about World's Fairs and put it into this context, the ongoing irony of an event that essentially does the opposite of what we often think it will do. And the start of the event goes back to 1851. Albert, the consort of Queen Victoria, was trying to think of ways to promote Britain. And there was, in fact, something that tempted him. And it was the idea of a fair, of some gathering that would allow you to promote your country, your product, to sell to the world something that hadn't been done before. And when he saw the idea, he proposed in 1849 to hold this gigantic fair in 1851 to sell the best that Britain could do. And he did. And in Hyde Park, they built something called the Crystal Palace. People had never seen anything like that before. It was a building that was all glass. It had plants growing inside it. It was huge. It attracted thousands. All the tickets sold out. And the tickets, when they started, in today's money, cost $250. It's not surprising that Walt Disney was inspired by World's Fairs. This building drew people from all over Europe. And they were attracted to it because of what it was able to do, of selling. But what exactly did it sell? Inside, it sold Britain. It sold the British industrial empire. And in the middle of the fair was Britain. And in the next ring in the fair were the European industrial countries. And as you went further and further away from the center of the fair, you found the marginalized populations of the world. The poor, the non-white, were pushed into crevices and corners throughout the building as entertainment. But the center of the universe was Britain. And so the fair revealed not necessarily the future Britain wanted, it revealed the present. It revealed the imperialist structure of the world economy. After that event, everybody wanted one. Fairs became very common. Some years there were 9 fairs that were held. And so we have this proliferation of events, and they all joined the bandwagon of selling to people a bright, optimistic future. And people loved them. It was their one chance to be part of something special, to see things they'd never seen before. The press encouraged you to sell the cook stove to go to the fair. You could spend your burial money to go to the fair. It was supposed to show how the future was filled with hope. The message was positive. But there was also dissent. Louis Sullivan took one look at Chicago in 1893 and said that one World's Fair set back American architecture 50 years because of its overly decorated design. It was contentious at the time, but it was still seen as something positive. Oh. So I want to talk to you about one of the virtues of fairs, and that is the optimism they embody. They show a bright future. They show the potential for doing the impossible. And one great example That's not a great example. That's a great example. One great example of this is the Eiffel Tower. Eiffel proposed it for the 1889 World's Fair. People hated it. It was called metal asparagus. He was inundated with lawsuits. The only reason this thing got built was that Eiffel assumed all of the responsibility for all the lawsuits that every neighbor had filed against the tower. They hated it. It was going to ruin Paris for all time. They were building it and didn't know if it would stay up. They didn't know if it would fall over. They didn't know if it would work. They couldn't even get the elevators to function. It was highly problematic, but it was built. And it was built and it became an icon. Visitors to the fair loved it. They saw this tower. Eiffel had an apartment on the top. The greatest ticket of the day was to go and have dinner with Eiffel in the top of the Eiffel Tower. People were captivated by this structure. And it was supposed to be torn down the next year. It was just a temporary thing. And so all those people that a few years earlier had sued Eiffel now, in fact, wanted the thing to stay up. And when you think about it, this testimony to optimism is the icon for Paris today. Yet, when it was being built, many people didn't believe it would happen. Another sense of optimism came in 1939 in New York. The World's Fair came at a time of Great Depression, great political distress. The Trilon and Perisphere in New York, in Flushing Meadow, offered hope. The Trilon pointed skyward. The Perisphere had a display called Democracy. It showed that democracy would save the depression-ridden population and allow them to have a bright future. This fair captured all the hope of an entire nation into the 30s, wishing for a peaceful and prosperous future. Looming over it all is a gigantic statue of George Washington, you can see silhouetted. And Washington looked over the fair, and the whole context of the event was the promise of better things to come. It was completely optimistic. That changed, but it was completely optimistic, and it was built as a testimony to optimism. Another element that was optimistic in 1939 at the fair was General Motors, who wanted to show how the world would look in 1960. And they had Norman Bel Geddes design it, they had Aaron Copland do the score for it, and they built this magnificent model that showed an automobile-based future. It was called Futurama. It had nothing to do with Fry. It was the first Futurama, the Futurama that digital immigrants like me know first. Futurama showed the future, and people bought into it. They loved it. Of course, what's sad as an urban planner is that we bought into this, which shows freeways and buildings and no people at all. And the Futurama of 1939 became the future we got. But as we look at it, it isn't the future we want. There's also hubris when it comes to World's Fairs. We have populations, tribes were brought into World's Fairgrounds to show people how residents of other countries, other parts of the world, were worse off. Native Americans were put on display. Here's a case of sabotage, using mirrors to prevent people taking photographs of them in 1904 St. Louis. In fact, the fair displayed people to use people. But those on display also used the fair. Groups would have chants and songs and taunts that mocked the people looking at them, although they never realized it. So what they thought were traditional dances and presentations were in fact insults being hurled back at them. But they just never understood what was going on. Paris in 1937 came to be a very prescient World's Fair. And what we have is, in fact, a face-off in the fairgrounds. On one hand, you have Soviet Russia attempting to show the success of communism. And on the other hand, you have the rise of Germany attempting to show the success of its ideology. Russia planned this fabulous, huge pavilion to show the triumph of communism. It's the worker and the peasant together. Germany wasn't going to participate. Hitler's architect Speer saw plans and insisted that Germany participate. And Germany produced a 500-foot-high pavilion topped with a gigantic eagle clutching a swastika. And this pavilion was right across from the Soviet pavilion. So we have pre-war Europe playing itself out across from each other under the Eiffel Tower at a fair meant to promote peace, but at the same time a fair that really was showing the future clash between fascism and communism. Even though this was playing out, people still celebrated. The fair was still an excuse to have fun. And many visitors take the fair at face value and don't dig into its meaning to understand exactly what is being done to influence their opinions. Brussels in 1958, we have another face-off. We have the United States in one corner, Soviet Union in the other, using the fair to make a statement. US Pavilion showed the triumph of capitalism through household consumer goods. It showed the bathroom of the future, the kitchen of the future. It showed an America trying to come to terms with civil rights. At the same time, the Soviet Union was originally going to have industrial displays. But just previous to the fair, they launched Sputnik. And so they brought all their rockets and space equipment to put on display. It was a wonderful statement at the time. The Cold War played itself out in this sense because both pavilions were filled with CIA and KGB agents who used the event to spy on each other. This really was the Cold War incarnate. Another virtue of fairs is treatment of aesthetics. We have Whistler. The Impressionists used World's Fairs to promote Impressionism. In the Depression, Whistler's mother, the world's first $1 million painting, drew huge lines of people that came to see what $1 million looked like because they couldn't imagine it in 1933 Chicago. We have 1929, Mies van der Rohe's pavilion for Germany in Barcelona. The pavilion was the shock of the new. It stunned people. And as part of the pavilion was furniture, the Barcelona chair, a classic chair, 80-year-old chair. I love this chair. The only trouble with this chair is it costs $4,523. There is, however, one group in America that loves this chair more than me, and these are crime scene investigators. If you watch CSI, you will see that they have wonderful offices, the lighting is incredible, they live in an oversaturated color palette that we would all die for, and they have Barcelona chairs in their offices. They have 3 of them. There are dozens of Barcelona chairs, so the fact that we and our police forces can afford this chair, I think is a true sign of success of the American political system. We have Alvar Aalto, classic vase from 1937. He designed the pavilion, and like many architects, he designed everything else that went into it as well. We have Corbusier designing Philips Electronics pavilion in Brussels in 1958. We have the Space Needle in 1962, classic Gugi architecture. And we have British Pavilion in Shanghai that opened a few weeks ago, where the pavilion itself is on a plaza that looks like the wrapping it came in. World's fairs can also be about anger, about people hating each other, using the event as protest. In 1901, there was a great deal of dissent. President McKinley came to the fair. He was asked earlier in his visit, did he need any security detail? He told everyone, no one's going to harm me. He didn't realize that there was an unemployed anarchist from Detroit who had the exact opposite opinion. He was in the music pavilion. The anarchist walked up, shot him. He said he felt okay. He fell ill. They couldn't find the bullet. This World's Fair was the first World's Fair showing the prototype of the X-ray machine. They never thought of using it. He died from the infection that the bullet at the World's Fair had caused a few days earlier. We can also think about peace at the fair. 1939, Franklin Delano Roosevelt opened the fair in New York talking about the Star of Peace, the fair as a symbol of peace. 6 months later, Hitler invaded Poland. The World's Fair became essentially a substitute. The Polish pavilion on the left, Czech pavilion on the right, in fact became countries in exile. They were taken over by their staff and they were used to represent views of their countries under attack. Lust is always a good topic for World's Fairs. World's Fairs are a collision of high and low art. People think you go there to be improved and to be educated. And as they start running out of money, they start using sex to get people to come to the fair. The Midway was created in Chicago in 1893 to entertain people, to bring them to the fair, to allow them to have a good time. One of the significant performers was Little Egypt, who popularized the hoochie coochie dance. We have Sally Rand and the fan dance. We have all types of dancers who were attracted to the fair for their audiences, sometimes under the guise of being exotic and sometimes under no guise whatsoever except to attract attention. And these always ended up in court. But they also didn't sustain many legal attempts. As Sally Rand was charged over a performance in 1933, the judge essentially says he goes to the fair to enjoy the exhibits, to have a beer, dismissed the case, and it continued. Fairs used entertainment to attract people, but they never said that was their intention. They wanted to educate. And there's also a little bit of joy with World's Fairs. The Ferris wheel. People loved being confused. They loved being unsettled. And they used the Ferris wheel to have that experience. And people loved to eat. The Belgian waffle of 1964, the ice cream cone of 1904, all popularized foods. Dr. Pepper, Kentucky Fried Chicken in Japan. Products are brought into society through fairs. And so we have the event, in fact, purporting to be about the future. But if you look into fairs, what you find is they're not so much about the future, but they're about the past. And they're not so much about virtue as they are about sin. And all it takes is really the decision by the viewer to think deeply about what it actually means to visit a World's Fair. Thank you.